Welcome back, and a special welcome to our next guest. He is Salih Hudayar. He has been elected the Prime Minister of the government of East Turkestan in exile. East Turkestan is also known by the Chinese communists as Xinjiang, and it is a place where the Uyghurs and other ethnic Turkish minorities of the Muslim faith are being brutally genocidally oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. Salih is a leading voice in opposition to the Chinese Communist Party and what it is doing to his people. He has also been a man who has been very concerned about the silence that seems to be the norm now in many parts of the so called Muslim world about the plight of their co-religionists in East Turkestan. I wanted to talk with him in particular about an event that took place just recently in Pakistan, a summit meeting of something called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. What went on there and didn't go on there is something we're keenly interested in. Salih, welcome to Securing America.
Thank you for having me, Frank. The OIC, or the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, is an international, collective body of Muslim governments or countries with the aim of, speaking out and addressing, the issues of Muslims across the world. This was founded, I believe, in the 1960s at the behest of Saudi Arabia's King Faisal, late King Faisal. However, the OIC at this latest summit and previous, summits, they have always raised the issue of Muslims in, Palestine, Muslims in Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq, even in Kashmir, but always been silent on the Muslims of East Turkestan, the Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. This year's summit was different, unlike the others, given the fact it was the first time that the Chinese government was invited as a special guest of honor to attend this summit. At the same time, while China is waging a genocide against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples, and has declared, war on Islam, calling Islam an ideological virus. Here, many of the countries were, all of these 57 countries were silent except for one, Turkey. But even what they said was very, it was the minimum. And I think it was done to mostly appease their constituents back in Turkey who are supportive of East Turkestan due to cultural and ethnic ties.
Sally, we were talking in the earlier segment about this Belt and Road Initiative and the inroads that it has made among nations of Central Asia, of Africa, of Latin America, and elsewhere. And I wonder, to what extent do you think it has successfully enabled the Chinese through, well, their infrastructure investments and frankly, their corruption to secure kind of a pass from these Muslim nations in many of those regions to the point where they're literally getting away with murder.
I think it's primarily because of the economic and political relations. China has dumped hundreds of billions of dollars into Muslim countries, and because they're most of the Muslim countries, they're also authoritarian regimes. Unlike Europe and the West, which if they want to invest in some countries, they will ask you, "Hey, is your human rights record on is it good? Uh, we don't want you to start persecuting these types of peoples." And China doesn't says that. In fact, China says, here's some more money, here's some more weapons. Go, persecute those people. Go persecute that group. This is the type of relationship that China and these Muslim countries have, and that's why they're willing to, sell essentially their own faith, despite the fact, their faith, their religion, and work with the Chinese, in many ways complicit in the genocide, given the fact that many of these countries are deporting Uyghurs who have fled, seeking refuge, in their countries.
Where they're deporting them to, of course, is the area you're talking about, East Turkestan, Xinjiang. And the question is not only what happens to them then, but also what else is going on there, including involving some very large, um, prominent, in many cases, multinationals or American companies, even, who are involved in not simply taking advantage of low cost Chinese labor, but are actually exploiting slave labor at the hands of Uyghurs and, as you say, other ethnic minorities. Talk, if you would, about what this means, obviously, to the people being enslaved, but also to propping up the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, the Chinese government since 2014 has locked up millions of people, according to the U.S. Department of Defense, about 3 million or more, into concentration camps and forced labor camps, where they are forced to, work as slave labor, making these products. A lot of, American businesses, some which have direct operations in East Turkestan, while others that use, intermediaries to buy, those certain goods, whether it's Nike shoes or even components of Apple's iPhone or their computers. And more importantly, one of the things that we're worried about is as the United States pushes forth with this building back America better and going green, they're still relying on Chinese solar panels, and about 50% of the world's polysilicon supply comes from East Turkestan alone. And this was before 2014, it was roughly 9%, and it erupted over 50% after the mass internment and forced labor of Uyghurs. So, in buying solar panels and solar products from China, we are contributing not only to the slave labor of Uyghurs, but also we are empowering the Chinese, Communist Party and its PLA to continue the genocide while at the same time grow at a rapid rate to threaten not just East Turkestan but essentially the entire world, including the United States.
That brings me to a question that is operating, I think, for a lot of us, especially against the backdrop of China's evident support for Russia in this Ukraine invasion. And that is, we're watching companies in this country and financial houses continuing to do business with or otherwise invest in China. Should we be applying similar kinds of sanctions to the Chinese as we are now applying to the Russians, in your view, in light of what they're doing in support of the Russian invasion, to say nothing of what they're doing to your people in East Turkestan and others among the captive nations enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party?
Absolutely. I mean, this should have been done at the very, before when the United States formally recognized China's atrocities against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples as genocide. They had a treaty obligation under the UN Genocide Convention to prevent and punish those committing genocide. And this is the least thing that needed to be happened. And it's still not too late today to, sanction, these Chinese companies, these Chinese officials, and ensure that we're not helping China contribute, continue the genocide, nor are we helping China contribute to this, expansionist, this expansionism that it's undertaking.
The question occurs, if we fail to do this, what are the consequences? As we saw with the genocide games, where it was business as usual, basically, for the Chinese Communist Party, to be sure, before the Ukraine invasion. But still, if we wind up following both the Trump and Biden administration declaring their behavior as genocidal, um, nonetheless persisting in our practice of engaging and supporting these people, is it going to embolden the Chinese further?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that the international community and the West has failed to push back or stand up against China is only empowering China and emboldening them to expand. China is, pushing further into the Indo-Pacific. They just recently signed a deal with the Solomon Islands, which is going to, have a huge threat to, direct national security of Australia and other Indo-Pacific allies. The fact that the U.S. is not doing enough to support Taiwan. This is the fact that China's not invading Taiwan right now doesn't mean they won't invade later. They have an upcoming Communist Party meeting, and after that is probably when many analysts fear that China will launch its invasion of Taiwan.
Sully, we have to leave it at that. Thank you very much for this important insight into what we are doing to encourage the Chinese communists to believe that they can act with impunity, perhaps at a time of their own choosing against Taiwan or perhaps other places, certainly against their own people. Come back to us again soon. Next up, we'll speak with the great Sam Faddis, former undercover operative at the Central Intelligence Agency. Straight ahead.